It was a global pandemic that the world was unprepared for. Millions died. Many millions more suffered long term effects. At the time, we were shocked by the images and scared. One could say the epicenter of COVID 19 was New York City, where the dead overwhelmed the morgues. Who could forget the images of the trucks lined up outside hospitals to stockpile the bodies? Nobody was immune, and everyone had a story. Lorraine Ash is a journalist who documented some of these accounts in her book, Corona City Voices from the Epicenter, from an Epicenter. She anthologizes stories from some of the people who worked the front lines of the pandemic, who were sick and survived, and how this moment in history shaped our new normal. It's important to note that 100% of the book's proceeds go towards hunger relief. This book is one of a few for the award winning Ash, who is a book editor and author and coach. And she has covered stories about the White House, homeless shelters, disaster zones, psychiatric wards, and more. Her stories provide a raw, unfiltered look at its most vulnerable moments. Please welcome Lorraine Ash.
It's great to be here with you, Debbie.
So, you have quite a storied background in journalism. When did you start writing?
Oh, I started writing in grade school. I went to Catholic school, and Sister Maureen got excited about a poem that I wrote. And she said, "We've got to bring this down the hall and show it to Sister Michelle, the English teacher." And it was really that moment that I thought, I can write. This is something I'm going to do.
So, talk about some of those other projects that you've worked on, such as homelessness and homeless shelters and psychiatric wards and whatnot. You've done quite a few different things.
Yes. It was, we kept progressing from Sister Maureen into college, and then into journalism school, and then into newspapers, weeklies, and then dailies. I was a enterprise reporter, a features reporter. I did a lot of long form journalism. So I had the pleasure and the culture at the time where I could really indulge stories. I mean, the editors would give me months to work on a story. So I could go into homeless enclaves in the areas where we were covering, interview people. And what I always wanted to do, I mean, even with mental health stories, veteran stories, whatever it happened to be, I thought that no story was ever complete until you were talking about the people who were impacted, right? The people who were impacted by anything, a policy, um, whatever, right? A change, some kind of change of fate. How did it translate to the average person? So that's really what we're doing. I'm bringing that sensibility into Corona City too.
Yeah.
Wanted it to be a grassroots history. How are the people doing? How is it going on the ground? I wasn't interested in any sanitized versions or any politicized versions. I was just interested in stories on how people are doing.
And what kind of attracts you to a specific kind of story? Because there are a lot of stories that you could work on, but what
Hmm.
attracts you to a specific story where you have to dig in deeper forensically to discover more about it?
The humanity of it. I mean, and so life is complicated. The idea of trying to figure out why something has happened, right? A story is a nexus point of elements, social elements, psychological elements, personal elements, cultural elements. How did a certain story at a certain point in time in a certain corner of the world come to be? That's what anatomizing that's what really intrigues me. I want to figure that out.
And what made you dive into this topic of COVID-19?
I was living in this first epicenter. And it's interesting when we first started work on the book, we called it Corona City Voices from the Epicenter because we were it.
Yes.
Then we changed it and it was an epicenter. But I found myself living in the middle of it. I'm in New Jersey, up north in the northeast corner. So we're very close to New York. New York State, New York City, um, and the state of New Jersey is 3 hours top to bottom. So very, very much encapsulated what was going on at that time and realized this is a historic moment. I'm no longer a journalist. I'm working in books. I'm working in first person writing. I can put all this together and make it a grassroots history. Want to do that. And fortunately, I found other people, team members, that could never do something of this magnitude alone, who wanted to work with me. You need
Hmm.
people who have supplementary skills. So Sherry Walker of Magic Dog Press, is an amazing in Oregon, amazing consummate designer. So she designed the book. I was able to find writers, 400 stories I collected. Not everybody actually is a writer. Some are New York Times bestsellers, some are non-writers, but it's part of the mix. They're all part of the mix, and that's compelling in itself. And then we moved on to the audiobook. I'm an audiobook producer, an audiobook casting director. So it took a lot of people, but I
Hmm.
realized I had I had access to the people. I could find more the people I needed, and I was in the middle of it. So I had to marshal those forces.
What was your biggest challenge in gathering, other than finding all these people? What was the biggest challenge in getting the research and interviews? Did everybody want to talk to you, or were there some that were a little hesitant?
Oh yeah, they people. I was asking people to submit their own stories, and then I edited them. Yes, and there were many folks. I did cold calls, all over the city, all over New Jersey, and some folks just didn't want to do it, or they couldn't quite understand what was happening. But
Hmm.
many folks did. And so collecting them, the logistics was interesting, right? Because we have a lawyer who was helping with us too, intellectual property lawyer who donated his time because he knew this was all for charity. So we had to get all the contracts together, to get people to sign the contracts, get the type in, uh, get photography in. I found 18 photographers who were out shooting during this time, and then get the pages so that even though the photographers and the writers aren't working together, as in the newspaper they may be, but we put together and drive the images and the words in such a way that they made sense. They were thematically connected anyway. It was just a lot of coordinating that way. It was okay, but it was a massive job.
Yeah, and we didn't know back then a lot about it back then, and you know you were, like you said, you were right in the middle of it. So what were some of the things that you personally observed, and how did your family cope with the lockdowns?
Oh boy. Well, I have a small family, me and my husband here. So we just followed rules. That's it was that easy. I mean, we wore masks. First, we had to get masks. Then we
Yeah.
found that the masks we were getting were inadequate because we could only find cloth masks, and there were all these cottage industries around, people making masks. Um, and then we found it was like a big find. We had N95 masks was like it was like gold. We shopped at midnight. So the stores were pretty much empty. We got vaccines when we could get vaccines. We just followed the rules.
And what story from your book grabbed you the most? What did you also learn from some of these other stories?
I mean, how much we were in the dark, because we were feeling our way in the dark. But also, even with that, how resilient people were,
Mm.
how innovative the medical personnel were, how brave the EMTs were. There was one story um, about an EMT who went out and realized that she was faced with the first COVID call they got. And
Wow.
she was on the lawn with the person. The person had just come back from a trip, I believe, from China, and they couldn't breathe. And she just put it all together and said, "Oh my God, that virus from China is here in town. You know, we're on. You know." And we have Jacob Finkelstein, the captain of the TNEC ambulance corps at the time, talks about what it was like to get, one call, two calls, and then 36 calls. And then, you couldn't even park the ambulance at the hospital to get the
No.
patient in. And when you got into the emergency room, it was just wild. You know, where could put this person? Where can we put that person? Um, the people who were working in the emergency room were taking off their masks just to suck in some oxygen sometimes, and it was just it was what they went through was amazing. And then, of course, they started falling, right?
Yeah.
The EMTs themselves started getting sick. We had unfortunate situations here with two state-run VA homes in New Jersey
Mm.
where we lost 200 vets from these homes, which is like 4 times the fatality rate from COVID in other VA homes in America. And they had a situation where they had one staffer to 100 vets at some point. It was amazing. Just what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, nobody
We
was
had
allowed to visit from the outside. Nobody could come in, even with the red, the senior homes.
That's right, and we have Nancy Mahoney Rice, who was a nutritionist in a senior nursing home, and she was talking about a piece is called "The Loneliness of the Elderly" and how heart crushing it was to see, some of the residents reaching on to glass because they're looking at their family
Mm.
members on the other side of the glass. This is the only way that they could visit. But at
Yeah.
least they could see their faces. They could do this, on the glass. Um, what a time! What a time!
And it was scary because that fear was real and people were dying. And it seemed, but also on the other side, that the pandemic seemed to be politicized, and the CDC didn't help when it had all the mixed messages right from the beginning. And
Right.
yeah, don't mask and then mask. And I mean, how are you supposed to, maybe that's where it all started, but how different do you think the response would have been if it had not been politicized?
Oh boy, I think people would have been calmer. They would have been moving in different directions. Now we had from February 2020 through the end of October 2020, President Trump had said 38 times, different press conferences, this virus is going to disappear.
Yeah, they
It
never
is
did.
disappearing. Don't worry about it. It's going to be April, and when the weather gets warm, you know how it is, it's just going to go away. So, gee, what do you think? You have urgency on one hand, you see your neighbors being taken to the hospital on the other hand, then you get this message that it's just going to evaporate somehow. You have too many mixed messages there.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the bleach message was unbelievable, right? I mean,
And then the
Lysol
QAnon stepped in and
QAnon steps in, and the Lysol company has to say, our products are not meant for ingestion in any way, and they're not going to help you with COVID. I mean, what wild messaging, really, right?
and we're
Um,
still getting it too.
right. It's true. You know what Dickens wrote? Right? It's the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of reason. It was the age of foolishness, and it's the same thing. Same thing in COVID.
Yeah, I hear that the Spanish flu pandemic went through similar things too. I mean, obviously it wasn't like televised like COVID was, but
Right,
they had the same type of issues where people didn't believe it. People, um,
right.
I think we lost a lot more people to COVID though than we did to the Spanish flu.
Yeah, but they lost a lot to the Spanish flu too.
Yeah,
But yeah, and it's it's hard to take in the message that it's not real when you see the devastation around you, when your neighbors or
yeah.
your mother is in the hospital. I lost
Um,
a relative I had recently found on a genealogical search, and she had gone in for an operation, was 85, and did very well, and then went into a rehab. The virus was in the rehab center, and she was in a weakened state, and it took her in a day practically.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you went on a respirator, very few in the early stages survive being on a respirator, and if they did survive, they were never the same physically and usually
That's
had
right.
serious lung issues. But the craziest part is the political party membership that that appears to be the most susceptible, right? They refused to take precautions or get the vaccine when it did become available. And I found an interesting quote from the Bulwark the other day. It says, that has resulted in a base loss that nobody ever talks about.
Uh,
So, because it's true, like the people that refuse to, I mean, if fewer people are dying from it, the vaccine must work. I'm lucky enough, I've had five shots, and I didn't even get a sore arm from them, so I'm pretty lucky I didn't have any side effects at all. And I've had COVID as well, but fortunately I think because of the vaccine it was very mild case. But there are other people I know who have had it really severe, and one person was on a respirator, but I think because she did have the vaccine, and this was in the early days, she survived. But she has been working through physically for quite a while, trying to get better. So I think she's getting there, but she will probably say she's never really fully back to where she was before she got it. So what are your observations about all of this mess?
well, I'll tell you we need reason in these times, right? And we value our freedoms, but one of the freedoms we have is the freedom to live, right? It's the first one. So we have to so much respect each other and and the danger that is apparent for all of us, and then cooperate, right? This is, in the United States, we have Democrats, we have Republicans. Lungs do not have a party, you know.
No.
We have to we have to come together in times like this because we can imperil one another.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean, come together like we did on 9/11.
right.
That was a
That's right.
beautiful time in a way that we all came together.
That's right. And
Um,
yet there were, there's plenty of heroism around, and
yeah,
it's reflected in the stories of Corona City. There's plenty of people who are doing wonderful things, and thank God. And we try to
yes.
accentuate that, bring that to the fore, and celebrate it and share it in these stories.
You mentioned just yesterday that the New Jersey just issued a 900-page postmortem report, so on the pandemic response. So what did you learn from that?
We learned that there was a plan. There is a plan for the pandemics and huge health crisis, that was put together in 2015, but that the leadership of the state didn't really wasn't very familiar with it. I mean, it was there, but it was not. I guess people weren't trained in it, it sounds like. And so implementing it was a bit slow. I mean, we did pick up, I think by the end of 2022, we had 89% of adults vaccinated, and it was 78% in the country. So we caught up. We did well with educating people on vaccine hesitancy.
Mhm.
We did less well in having equipment, having PPE. Then we had a real shortage there. So we're not necessarily ready for the next problem. So I think that this call was supposed to be a wake up call or an alarm, if you will, that we have to do more. Now, the nurses that I've talked to, and some of the nurses who wrote, for the book, say, listen, we know a lot more now. So if it happened again on the ground level, in the hospital, they're just more ready. But generally, as a population, we have to be more ready. And we
Yeah.
certainly have to do more to protect the veterans' homes. We know that because that was really amazing. There was a veteran we have writing in the book, and he said that it was like they went down in silent machine gun fire, from COVID. It was
Oh.
crazy, and we our numbers surpassed war dead in months. Um, so we have to do better there.
And one of the things that I always wondered about, uh, most of us in other countries, probably just about all other countries, have healthcare. And so in Canada here, we did not have to pay for a vaccine shot. If we went into the hospital, we never paid for it, right? It was all covered under our healthcare plans, which is government. And but was that the case in the US? Like, if you were sick with COVID, I mean, did all of a sudden your family get hit with this terrible bill when a person died, or like, how did it work down there?
Well, our vaccines were free for
Okay.
sure. The test kits were not for a while. So
Right.
it was really hard to find them, and they were really expensive. So and you need them to know what you're dealing with.
That doesn't
You know,
make
you
sense.
oh, I have it. So uh, we had that situation. Even now, I mean, I still get the boosters. We're not paying for the if your insurance company is paying for the boosters now. So we at least we did have that, yeah. But in terms of what was being covered by insurance, I think that was probably playing out on a case by case basis.
Mm.
Part of it was problems with protocol. Like some people were, like for example, l- was living with COVID but did not die from COVID, or had COVID coexisting with something else. I mean, so the the medical codes. Who know how all that played out? It seemed to be a very individual thing.
Wow. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it seems like insanity that, because it's something that you can't control, and you shouldn't be. I mean, it's hard to, considering all the money that the government has, right? Especially the American government. It's nuts, but that's my opinion.
But now there's free tests. I mean,
Yeah,
and you can get tests anywhere, and you can pick one up for $10, which and actually is kind of expensive, but you can do
yeah.
that. But for
Ours is
example,
still free.
in my hometown, for example, there's government issued tests, and you just need to go to the town hall, and each household can get 4 free tests at a time. So
Yeah,
that's good. We do have that.
and they're not 100% reliable, but
Pretty good.
they're not the same as when you used to line up to go to the hospital or go to get the actual physical test from the healthcare professionals. That seemed to be more accurate, but even so, of course, things have changed too. I don't know about what it's like down there, but now if you have COVID, depending on which province you live in, you don't even have to isolate anymore.
Oh, right. So we just got a new mandate just like within the last week that, you don't have to hole up for, 5 days anymore.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So
I would, but
does that mean we're going to spread it around again? I don't know.
we have a lot of sickness here. I mean,
Yeah,
this season has been rough. We have a lot of COVID. We have RSV. We have 7 different kinds of flus. We got norovirus. People are down a lot.
yeah.
Um, and I work with authors here in this area and also across the United States. And I'm noticing even in the last week, I mean, I myself had a norovirus, but I'm talking to somebody in Oregon does, somebody in New Mexico does, somebody in Texas does. I mean, it's just around generally. I think because we were quarantined for 2 years, right? We're usually
And we
out
were
and about.
masked when we went in everywhere, and we weren't catching everybody's cooties.
Right. It's not really, I mean, we're not out of the bubble yet. I mean,
Yeah,
we have far few people hospitalized with COVID, now, but there are people hospitalized with COVID.
yeah, there are. Um, now they don't really test so much as they test the wastewater more than the anything else, and that isn't a good sign because when they reveal the results of the wastewater tests, it's not usually very encouraging. But anyway, we're still here, so. Um, so, do you think this polarization aspect of COVID was like the turning point of how our countries became divided, or was this just the flashlight that exposed what was already there?
It probably was causal. I mean, I don't have the breadth of international knowledge to say something like that definitively. But I do think that um, all of this happening while media is contracting was
Yeah,
part of the big part of the narrative here. Right? We lost 36,000 journalists in the pandemic, and the number of journalists we have in the U.S. was halved from 2008 to 2019. Now,
crazy.
this is where we turn for um, help, right, with opinion leadership, facts, analysis, and that's going down and down and down as our need for it goes up and up and up. So the cross country, the cross state dialogues are degraded, I think, because of that. There's still lots of great media out there, yes,
Mhm.
but we're really, really weakened in that way.
Yeah,
Democracy needs a strong press.
it's kind of. I mean, yes, by choice too, by some groups prefer to have everybody in a bubble, I think, because that way
Right.
you can control your masses. But it is, having worked in media myself, it is hard to see your colleagues get laid off, and
Oh,
it is. I mean, I'm in some ways, because our media intake and how we intake media is changing. So I'm a little disturbed by the TikTok ban that everybody wants, because the only reason for, I mean, it's not Chinese, it's the guy's from frickin' Singapore. And, and, but anyway, the reason I'm disturbed by it, because that seems to be the go-to place where the other media areas, like you just mentioned, are falling short. People are turning to certain other sources where they can actually stay on top of what's going on in their own communities or in their province or state. And plus, it also is where the younger generation
right.
communicates. So if they want to ban it so much, is they don't want young people to have a voice, I guess. So
Mm,
that's what I hear, is when I hear about TikTok bans, they don't want young people to have a voice and or a vote. So because that is a discussion that goes on in these platforms. There's a lot of political discussion, both sides. I mean, all sides. I mean, you've got your you have healthy discussions between both sides, and then you also have your trolls as well. But I mean, yeah, the media aspect of it. While there are other areas that have grown from the digital side, they may not necessarily be traditional platforms, but that's where a lot of good conversations are made as well. So I don't know. It's an interesting world. It's an interesting
And
time.
it's also a monolithic platform, right?
Yeah.
And so we we need media too that are regional and local, you know, in your case, provincial or statewide here. I
Yeah.
mean, that know people writing who really know the area, the history of the area, the people of the area, and that helps conversations too.
Hmm.
Instead of having just monolithic platforms.
Yeah. It's kind of like the pool, instead of the pool reporting where, you get one outlet and they share the same story in every location. But I mean,
Right.
you know,
Right. It's
and
cost
also,
effective and not helpful.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So getting like the healthcare system from COVID hasn't, I don't know about your side down there. I think it's the same. Um, but it hasn't really recovered because we've lost so many. Well, a lot of people have died. A lot of people have left the profession
Right.
because the stress was so crazy. So that report that you mentioned, it is
Mhm.
kind of scary in a way because we won't be prepared for even the next car wreck, let alone pandemic.
Mm, mhm, mhm. Burnout's real
Yeah.
in the medical. I can't imagine what they did, the
Oops.
stress they were under, the not sleeping shift after shift. Oh my gosh,
And then I'll add that and compound that with you've got your conspiracy theorists who have threatened their lives. And
right,
I don't know if you've had that, but we've had it here in Calgary where they've actually waited for healthcare workers outside the building, and the group of them protesting the hospitals and the healthcare workers that phoning and threatening people, and it's just crazy, and no wonder they want to leave the profession.
yeah. We have even doctors' offices now can't find enough people to, even man the phones. I mean,
Yeah.
you have contracted office hours. I mean, thank God you still have them, but it's hard. It's hard.
I mean, it is interesting times, but there has to be some hope, I know
Yes.
that there are some professionals and there are some people that are working to change things. It's trying to streamline a system, the healthcare systems, to make it more efficient, and some of it's like experimental, but I mean, you got to try, right?
That's right. No, that's right. We made, w- a lot of innovation, and a lot of good people put in a lot of effort and saved lives. And people are more educated now, at least in this area. I feel that.
Yeah.
Um, so we have to just build on what we've got, the good things that we've got.
And one of the positive things they've done here is they've opened the door to allow pharmacists to have more authority on prescribing and doing some things so that you don't always have to go to the doctor. The pharmacist has in many of the locations have the authority to do a little bit more, and that takes a little bit of pressure off the healthcare system. So
Oh, that's nice.
so that's a
That's a
positive.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And one positive anyway.
Right.
Yeah, there. I mean, there are few. There are a few, but that is one. So besides writing, you're also helping other people with their own books. And
Right.
who do you prefer to work with? What kind of people do you like to work with? And do you also prefer certain topics? Because I mean, you're not going to work with everybody, right?
No, oh gosh, no, you could never do it. But I specialize in memoiric writing or any nonfiction writing with a first person element. I
Okay.
believe in the power of that autobiographical voice. And there's so much to do. It's so popular, and there's so much innovation in in that area. There's a genre and subgenres and new ways to present, interior realities and emotional truths all the time. It's a fantastic space. So I do take on clients where the story speaks to me. It's in the first person, or it's a self-help first person book, that kind of thing. Um, when the topic is really, like I say, really speaks to me because you live with a book for a long time as an editor,
Yeah.
and I also ghostwrite. I'm a certified ghostwriter through the California State University at Long Beach. There's my New Jersey, California thing going on there. Program. So when you're ghostwriting, and really even when you're editing, you're living with this topic and this person's story, y 10, 11, 12 months. You have to resonate with it on some level. There's gotta be something about it that is, impressing you, that you feel is important, and you feel the urgency of the message or the humanity of the story, and you've gotta feel that.
And what is some advice you would have for somebody thinking about writing a book?
Oh, thinking about writing a book. Um, yes, I would urge them. There's a couple of ways to begin. You can begin with a structure, or you can begin a more piecemeal by seeing what it is that comes to mind when you sit down to write. So ask yourself, what are the first 12, 13, 14, 15 scenes from my life that occurred to me? And then write them down, then read them over, and see if there's a theme or something there that threads them together. And then you could start putting a structure on it. Or, as I said, if you could do it the opposite way as well. But when you find that when you do start writing and you do start thinking about structure with your conscious mind, your subconscious mind starts working with you and starts throwing things up into the conscious space saying, "You forgot this?" These two things go together very well. So you'll see that after a while, you do get a momentum going. And also, writing community is important, right? Sometimes people lose passion for their own story when they're writing themselves, but it's the power of a group that helps give you feedback and supports you can keep you going when otherwise alone you might stop.
Lorraine, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Debbie Elicksen. Thank you to my guest and to you, the viewer, for watching this episode of Locker Room for Growth. Please subscribe to this channel and check out our past shows and clips in the YouTube playlist. The show broadcasts from Treaty 7 on Turtle Island, the traditional territory of the Blackfoot people, which includes Siksika, Blood, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, and Métis Nation Region 3. Again, thank you for watching and please subscribe.